First of all, it's a great honor, a privilege, a delight to be asked to address you on a subject that's very close to my heart, preemptive marketing. And it's particularly satisfying to me to be able to do it in conjunction with an event that has the world's premier expert on achieving business excellence, as well as the world's premier expert on achieving business greatness. So it's very, very, very exciting for me to try to integrate my beliefs in with what you either have learned or will be learning from Jim Collins and Tom Peters and the other speakers who will be part of the celebration this week. So first of all, let me say this. I have never formally integrated what I'm about to share with you before in a public setting. I've talked about it privately with my high-paying clients, but I've never talked about it before. So let me start. First of all, let's start with the concept of preemptive marketing. It's all about hurdling your business, your product, your service into a stature in the eyes of the market or the market niche that you deal with in a way where you stand out so stratospherically superior in value creation, in trust basis, in the service or the value that you provide, that there's no contest. You have won. What does this accomplish? It very quickly puts your competitors, all of them, into a disadvantage mode where they have to take on more risk, more effort, more difficulties trying to really even come close to equaling the stature or the position that you have created. Okay, so how do you establish your company, product, service in a way that is so preemptive? And preemptive means that you have achieved the superior position, that you are above, that you have blocked, that you are beyond the stature of your competitors. And it doesn't matter whether you sell high-end, low-end product, service, and how fiercely you compete. You can create a preemptive marketing advantage. So let's start with a realization. And it's sad but true, and it's a great advantage for you. Almost everyone in your industry markets the same way, sells the same way, relates to the product and relates to the consumer or the business-to-business buyer the same way. I'll tell you a story. Very interesting and very, very appropriate. So a man marries a wonderful woman. They have children. They've been married for many years, and they start a procedure that every Christmas they go to the woman's mother's home for Christmas dinner. Every year the mother makes a roast. And the man goes in the kitchen and talks while they're preparing the roast. And the mother starts by taking the raw piece of meat and cutting off both ends and putting it in the pan and then putting all the seasoning and then roasting it. For 2 or 3 years, he watches this process in fascination and a little bit of bewilderment, wondering why in the world she starts by cutting off the 2 ends of the roast, the raw roast, before she puts it in the oven. Finally, after 3 or 4 years, he gains the courage to ask and says, Mom, why do you cut both ends of the raw roast off before you put it in the oven? She says, because that's what I learned from my mother. Her mother is still alive and was at the family Christmas dinner. So they went to the great-grandmother and they asked her, Mom, why did you start cutting both ends off of the raw meat on the roast before you put it in the oven? And her answer was hilarious. She said, when we first came to the United States from Europe, we were very poor. And we lived in a very tiny apartment. And it had an itty bitty tiny oven. And the oven was so small that even the smallest roasts we would buy at the grocery were too big to fit into the oven. So the only reason we cut off both ends was to get the meat into the pan and get the pan in the oven. But it became a process. It became a way of doing cooking every year, and it was handed down from mother to daughter to daughter. The point of the story, it's simple. Many people in your industry do the same things the same way because they've either observed it as an industry process, we call it a herd mentality, where one member of the herd leads and everybody follows, or you worked in that industry before you started your own business, or you just basically have observed and decided that's how you're going to do it. They do not do it because it is absolutely the best way to do something. They do not do it because it's the most profitable. They do not do it because it's the most powerful. They do it because that's the way that industry does it. My whole career, my life, has been defined and denominated by the privilege and the fact that I have worked and I have been deeply involved in 465 industries. That has given me the ability and the broad spectrum of observation. And I've seen how many different and more powerful and more practical and more profitable ways different industries have discovered and uncovered of reaching a market, of selling to a market, of protecting their position in the market, of reselling the market, of competing in the market. And I can promise you that unless you're a very special company, right now, what you do, how you do it, where you're doing it, even why you're doing it is pretty much the same as everybody you compete against until now, this moment. Because from now on, you're going to be the industry preemptive marketer. You are going to be the company, the product, the service, the organization that leads and is the most trusted, the most respected, the most desired choice the market can possibly make. Now, how are you going to do it? It's going to start by understanding more dimensionally and more comprehensively and more completely exactly what the criteria, the factors your market uses to make their buying decisions. That includes understanding what your marketplace's definition of value really means to them. Now, this may sound very simple, but what you think is value to your market, they may not really agree upon. You may think that, hey, we've got incredible equipment and incredible technology, and they may not care about it if your people aren't service-oriented, if they aren't accessible, if when they place an order it doesn't come on time, if your product is complicated to use. So the first thing you have to do before you can become the absolute preemptive and preeminent, they go hand in hand. Preemptive means you block everybody. You're above everybody and they can't even penetrate your positioning and your connection with the market. Preeminent means you've hurdled yourself to the stature and the distinction of the absolute pinnacle. And again, you can be the pinnacle even if you're very low priced and a relatively modest position in the market. You can still be distinctive, differentiated, preemptive. So first thing starts out by understanding how your market makes their buying decision. What is their mental criteria? Second is understanding what they determine and what they define value as being. Now, how do you do that? Let me count the ways. There are numerous ways, and they are going to be mind-expanding, perspective-altering, and amazingly empowering to you. The first thing you have to do is clearly understand and comprehensively analyze, assess, and study how all your competitors market. Now, I have said that you do things pretty much the same, and that is true, but there are differences. So you must study, first of all, their website and see what they say, how they say it, the positioning they take, the desirable elements that they include, where they are weak. Second, you have to see when you get a client that they didn't, you have to ask why. And you have to not just ask yourself, but ask your client, why did you buy from us and not the competition? Or if you take a client away. Conversely, if you lose clients or you can't get clients because they either are solidly committed to a competitor or they leave for a competitor, you have to find out exactly why. You have to talk to the client. And the why may be verbalized as, oh, they had a better price, but I can promise you that price alone should never be the determinant. If it is, it means that your company and your product and or your service did not communicate, did not convey, did not represent enough superior value and enough powerful advantage that it meant enough to the consumer, to the client, to stay with you. And that's a very big recognition. So how else do you do this? Well, first, when you look at all the competition, you make comprehensive list. What do they do well? What don't they do? What's their position on their website? How do they sell? What is their selling proposition? What advantages, if any, do they have over us? What disadvantages, if any, do they have beneath us? Do we take advantage of our advantages? Do we respectfully focus on the gaps or the disadvantages? Do we even know that? Secondly, you have to understand the alternatives that they have to your product. And many companies, many products, many services, there are no alternatives. But with many, there are. As an example, just as a reference example, if you were selling a supplement for weight loss, you'd want to know what all the other supplement companies competing against you did well, did poorly, how they articulated, how they verbalized, how they expressed their value proposition, their selling approach, their benefits, their message to the market, if you will. But you also want to know about all the alternatives, because if someone wants to lose weight, they have other alternative choices. They can choose an exercise video, they can choose equipment they can buy, they can choose joining a health club, they can choose getting a personal trainer. And you need to know what all of those alternative choices do, how they sell, what they say, how they say it, so that you can use the best of all of that to your maximum preemptive advantage. Also, and this is interesting, if you really want to do a comprehensive job of achieving the excellence and the greatness that you're going to learn about, or you've already learned about today and at this event, you want to study the parallel universes. That means if you were a distributor in a vertical category, you might want to study all the other distributors in other similar categories but not competitive. Why? Because you are looking for breakthroughs. You're looking for advantages that you have not recognized before. You're looking for weaknesses that you can capitalize on. You're looking for ways people position, express, offer their product. You're looking for a series of benefits and advantages that people offer that you can either exceed or borrow if it's from a non-competitive alternative industry. And you're making this big list. You're doing nothing with it yet except allowing your mind to take it all in and process. Because remember, fundamentally, everybody in an industry does it pretty much the same, but pretty much is not exactly. And your goal is to do it wonderfully and decisively different, better, much more preeminently, much more preemptively. So how do you get to the mind and the soul of the market? How do you really learn what your market values most, what they have no respect or no value for, what they want more of, what they want less of, what their problems are, what their goals are? There's a number of ways. Let me give you a few of them now, and I could get into this very deeply and talk for hours and hours, but I only have a maximum of this kind of a window, so I'm introducing you to this way of thinking. So the first thing I ever do when I have a new client in a new industry is I make a list of all the books that are written about any variation or any application of that industry. Let's take, for example, machine equipment, or we could take dentistry, or we could take buying a new or a used car, or we could take booking a vacation with a travel agent. We look at all the books that have been written on the subject. We take the top 25, and normally you can find them on an Amazon.com or whatever other reference site you use in Japan. And most of these sites have two wonderful, wonderful, wonderful advantages that no one takes full use of. They have reviews by users. The reviews are ranked by numbers, 1 to 5 or 1 to 10. Usually 1 is undesirable, 10 is very desirable. The consumers, the buyers, the users express in their own words what they got most out of the book and what they got least out of the book. Also, most books sell mostly because of the title and the subtitle and the promise or the big payoff or the benefit that the headline or the title of the book promises. Why are these two factors important? Because they give you insight, they give you understanding, they give you direct pulse and access to what stimulates the mind of your market. Now, granted, you may be selling cars, and the book may be How to Buy a Car. But what the title of the book will tell you is how to communicate advantage to your market. For example, let's say a book on buying cars was titled How to Buy a Car and Get the Best Value for the Fairest Price from the dealership that will give you the best follow-up service. If that was the title of the book, and that was a very successful book, that would tell you that you could use a variation of that same title to distinguish your company. In other words, we are the company that offers you the fairest price and the greatest value with the finest follow-up service that you will get, and we can prove it. And you can do that with almost any book. So you make a complete list of all the top 25 books in each category that is even vaguely related to what you do, and the subtitles, because these are the key drivers, the key motivators of people. Now it's giving you insight into what turns on your market. Then you go to the reviews. This is very interesting. You look at the best reviews and the worst reviews. In my example, if the reviews go numerically 1 to 10, you start with the ones which are normally the negative ones, what people didn't want. They might say, this book doesn't give me answers, or this book leaves me frustrated, or it doesn't help me understand how to, how to deal with vendors, or it doesn't. And the positive will be all the things they got out of it and all the clarity they got and how it addressed issues that were important to them. Like, I finally learned how to use my management team more effectively, or my inventory control more profitably. And you take all the good and all the bad and you put those in lists. Now, I will explain in a minute why you're doing all this. You are learning. You are learning how your market thinks. You are learning what they value, what they don't. Why are you doing all this? Because you want to become the preeminent and the preemptive marketer in your field or in your niche. We're building this, so continue along. And what I'm going to do is give you a lifetime, massive business competitive advantage. Think about it as if you were running a race, foot race, and everyone else was starting at the starting point, but you were able to start a full half lap ahead of everyone else, and it wasn't penalizing you because you were weak. You were actually stronger. You had more muscles, and you had a better running style, and you understood aerodynamic, and you understand pacing and endurance, but you got the advantage because you understood how to get it. You understood how to give it to yourself. That's what we are talking about. So now you are building this comprehensive insight into three things. One, what you've learned about how your competition sells and about related non-competitive competition, what they do well, what they don't, language patterns, benefits, weaknesses. So you've got this incredible list of understandings and insights. You're learning the phraseology that appeals tremendously to your market by looking at the titles and the subtitles of the books. And you're learning what people like and what they don't like by looking at the reviews. And I forgot to say something very important. When people write reviews, they're normally written out of a state of passion. Now, passion normally is thought of as being positive, but it can be negative passion. You can be so angry and so disappointed that you're negatively passionate. But whether you are positively passionate or negatively passionate, what you are is authentic. When you are passionate, it turns off the restrictors and the filters between your subconscious mind and your mouth. And what it allows your subconscious mind to do is clearly and quickly and powerfully and emotionally express in the most wonderful way possible what you want, what you don't want, what you like, what you don't like, what you got out of something, what you didn't get out of it. And all of that language pattern is insight into the mind and the values of the market you're trying to dominate. And you are trying to dominate in a benevolent and in a high contribution way. So why do you want to know this? Okay, very simple. If I understand masterfully what turns you on and what turns you off, if I understand totally comprehensively how to express value that you desire better than anybody else, if I understand how to attach that value to the product or service I sell. And I understand what you don't want. And I also understand what the competition doesn't do. And I understand how to add infinitely more value, tangibly and intangibly, to the transaction or the relationship. I am going to possess outrageously superior preemptive advantage over everyone else. Okay, so let's take this thought to the next level. So now you've got this understanding. Now you've got this insight into where you're strong and where you're weak. So we start by where you're strong and where you're weak, and then we question where you're strong. Do you properly express that? And do you express that to your market in a way that they can really value? Or do you not? Now, I have to interrupt myself and make a very important point. And this is integral and critical to not just understanding, but to harnessing and harvesting. One is controlling, the other is monetizing the power of preemptive marketing. There are many elements in what your business does that are probably exactly the same as what every other business you compete with does. However, your market doesn't know any of that. The first company that expresses to the consumer the totality and the dimension of what you do and the processes you go through to do it and the expense and the stages that it required will gain a three-dimensional perspective in the eyes of the market that will connect you, your product, your company, and your people at a much higher level. Now that's a little theoretically, so let me give you 3 examples. Example number 1. This is a classic, but it instantly makes the point. One of the people that was my great mentor was the father of preemptive marketing. His name was Claude Hopkins. He would go into an industry that was competing fiercely and had no advantage, and the first thing he would do was have that that company's president or managing director walk him through systematically everything they did, why they did it, how their people were trained to do it, the background on their people, the cost of the equipment they did it with, the complexity of getting the product or service made and rendered to the audience or to the market. And they would be curious. Let me give you an example. One of his great success stories was a beer company. It was called Schlitz. Funny name. When he started, Schlitz was number 9 in a market of 20. And they had no distinction. They were all the same. So when Claude Hopkins went to the Schlitz Brewery Company, he took a tour. First thing they showed him was where they got their water. Now this is very interesting because the brewery was located right on the banks of one of the most massive and beautiful lakes in the United States, a Great Lake. And yet they had 2 artesian wells dug 5,000 feet deep from which they were acquiring their water. And the first thing he asked was, why do you do that? Why don't you just take it out of the lake? And they said, because the caliber of water that we use to make our beer has to have the right mineral content, the right balance. That was fascinating. Then they took him inside and they showed him the first room was the yeasting room. And they showed him the mother yeast cell. This was the cell from which all the yeast they used to make beer, and in the beer brewing, they used yeast. And they did 1,687 experiments to find the mother yeast cell that had the perfect balance of sweetness, bitterness, taste but not aftertaste. 1,650 experiments. So every other piece of yeast they made came from this resulting master mother yeast cell. Then they showed him the distilling room. They were 9-foot thick glass walls in a room where they vaporized and liquefied, vaporized and liquefied, vaporized and liquefied the water that they had just taken out of the 5,000-foot deep well to get rid of all the impurities. And he thought that was amazing. They did 3 times. Then they showed him the bottling sanitation room. They brought bottles in and they cleaned and sanitized them, not 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 or 5, 9 times. They did it under 2,000 degree liquid steam. They did it in chemical. They did it in special lighting. They did it every way possible because they wanted not 1 ounce or fraction or micron of impurity in that glass bottle before the beer went in. Then they showed him the bottling plant that had people wearing all kinds of sanitation gear and masks, and it was a purified room where there was no dust and no impurities, and there were all kinds of equipment to guarantee it. And even then, they showed him the quality control process at the end of all this, where 1 out of every 30 batches still had something wrong and they had to discard it. Even with all that. By the time Claude Hopkins had taken that tour, he knew what he wanted to do to be preemptive. He said, my God, you have to tell the story of how you make your beer to the market. And the people at Schlitz Brewing Company said, but that's how all beer is made. And Claude Hopkins said, yes, but none of your competitors tell the market. The first person to revere, to dimensionalize, to document all the processes and the expense and the effort that they go to will gain preemptive advantage. Anyone else trying to follow will look like they are just plagiarists. And he did that for Schlitz. He gave them preemptiveness by taking each one of those processes and describing it and revering it in their marketing and in the selling that they did to the bars and to the groceries and all their advertising. And in 6 months, Schlitz beer went from number 9 to number 1 and stayed there for 5 years. That's how powerful preemptive marketing is, but I'm only giving you one example. Let me give you 2 more, and I'm only giving you 1 tool. There's probably 100 tools I could give you, but I only have a short time today, so I'm going to give you the best tools. The first one is to revere and denominate and document all the stages and the steps. Now, let me give you another one. I had a client in the very high-end shoe, women's shoe, and women's handbag business. And they sold back 10 years ago, they were selling $1,000 pairs of shoes and $3,000 handbags. And we needed to distinguish why we were preemptive and preeminent. So here's what I did. I asked her exactly what process she went with, this was the owner, to find the handbags and the shoes that she offered in her store. And she said, well, I go to a lot of trade shows and I visit a lot of the booths and I go to the Shoe Mart in Los Angeles and New York and in London and in Italy. And I go to visit manufacturers and I go to their buying rooms and I look at the suede and I look at the snake skins that they use and I look at their manufacturing and their production processes. I said, does everybody else do that? And she said, yes. And I said, but nobody tells the market that. Let's calculate what you do in a typical year. She goes, okay. So we calculated that she flew 400,000 miles. We calculated that she went to 87 different trade shows. We calculated that she was exposed to 25,000 different manufacturers of shoes and handbags that represented over 150,000 choices. We calculated that she walked up and down something like 1 million steps, and that she looked at something like 100,000 items to choose the 30 or 40 that went into her store that she offered. And we calculated that she only chose the manufacturers whose skins were perfectly matched and whose stitching was triple silk, which every high-end manufacturer did, but no one ever told the story. And when we told this story, we distinguished and we preempted her retail store from everyone else, and her sales skyrocketed. One more. I have a client that manages catastrophic injury cases for attorneys. And she manages the relationship between the attorneys and the insurance companies when someone gets injured badly in an automobile accident. And we had to do a conference trade show. And we needed to make her preemptive and preeminent. What did we do? We did what none of her competitors did. We looked at all the cases she had handled and we counted them. We looked at the diversity of cases she had handled and we listed and we enumerated them. We looked at the number of attorneys and law firms she had worked with and we listed them and we quantified them. We looked at the various specialties that she had within her company and within her usage access, meaning vendors and providers she used, and we listed them. We calculated the totality of settlements and awards that she had been able to claim in behalf of her clients, and we totaled them. We took case studies and we put them into file folders that we showed. We interviewed satisfied clients and satisfied attorneys and even insurance companies, and we posted videos at our trade booth. Now, any other competitor could have done most or even more than that, but they didn't think to. By doing all the things we did, by denominating, by demonstrating, by contrasting, by comparing all the advantages of what we did, and by making ourselves appear so superior, we gain preemptive advantage. And again, I'm only talking one thing. One more. I had another client that was the largest advisory firm to the legal profession. And they had worked on more cases than you can imagine, but every time we had a prospective client, whether it was a law firm or the corporation that the law firm represented, we would look at the scenarios of the case. In other words, the case could have been against a product manufacturer. The case could have been being tried in a rural area. The case could have been about a very unique type of an injury. And we would go to our database of past cases, and we would find examples of all of those different scenarios, and we would demonstrate to the client that we were the most expert in our opinion. In our opinion, there might have been more, because we were able to show them all the things we had done that mirrored the scenario that they did. That's being preemptive. Now I've given you one element of preemption. Now let's take another, because we're going to run out of time. It's to be preeminent. Now, what does preeminent mean? Preeminent is a strategic philosophy or a philosophical strategy that is the cultural driver of your business, and it's a big shift. I don't have time to give you the totality of it because it takes about 3 hours, but I'll give you the fast, easy points. First, you want to establish your business as the most trusted advisor in the niche or in the field. You want to see yourself, and you want your market to see you as being their most trusted advisor, the source they turn to for ideas and strategies and advice, not information. Information is unemotional. Advice is passionate. You want to tell them what you believe they should do for their best interest, what you believe they should not do, and you want to be very focused that you're going to be their most trusted advisor for life. By being an advisor, you've got a moral responsibility and an obligation to tell them what you believe and what you don't. You want to tell them how and why your product can be better for them and how your product and your company is committed to support them better. These are tangible things and they are intangible things. You want to have your company feel an integral part of the relationship with that client. So you want to have everyone in the company, no matter whether they answer the phone, no matter whether they deliver the product or do the service, or they are the accounts receivable person, they all need to feel a connection in what you do, in what your product or service does for the client. And they have to understand it not as a generic product, but as a transformational process. Let me give you an example. If I go to the home improvement store to buy a drill, I don't really want a drill. I want a hole. I have to fasten something or attach something. We want you and your whole organization, your team, to be connected to the reason why the client is buying your product or service, meaning how your product or service impacts their life or their business, so that you will see it as more than a commodity. Now, because I need to hurry, you'll notice I keep saying client, client, client. I'm not saying customer. Why? Because if you want to be seen as the most trusted advisor, you have to have an attitudinal distinction in how you interact with your buyers. And if you look at the definition in a dictionary of a customer, it's someone who buys a product or a commodity or a service. There's nothing special. If you look at the definition of a client is someone who is under the care, the protection, the well-being of someone. It conveys, it connotes a much higher level of connectivity between your company, your product, your service, and the buyer. Now, it gets a little more, not complicated, but exciting. You are committed, if you want to be preeminent and preemptive, to fall in love with not your company to be the fastest growing, not your product to be the best, although it should be better than anyone else's, but to fall in love with the clients you serve and the impact and the value and the contribution your product and all the other value adds that you can contribute make in their lives. And when you fall in love with your client, you have 3 different clients that you need to fall in love with. First and foremost is the market that pays you, the buyer. But second, you have to fall in love with your team members, the people you pay, because if they are not in total attitudinal and total contributional and total philosophical accord and congruency with you, then you can't be preemptive or preeminent. You also have to fall in love with your vendors and your advisors and your suppliers, because they have to help you in your commitment and conviction to be preemptive and preeminent. And again, I'm on a very limited timeline here, so I'm going to be rapid. So a preeminent company is a company that understands their client better than their competitor. They understand what their client feels, what their client wants. They understand, going back to this lesson earlier, what the client defines value as being, what they don't want. And the preemptive and the preeminent company knows how to put into words the feelings that the clients want, the outcomes that the clients are after, the negatives that the clients do not want to receive in the transaction. And when you are the first and only one to put into words what people feel, it immediately connects you at a deep bonded level that is very, very amazing and very hard to break. Now I'm going to rapidly, because I don't have the time to get deep, deep, deep into this, so I'm going to get a couple of more levels of sophistication. So once you understand this, then your first goal, because we talked about understanding how your client buys, what their buying criteria is, and also what their definition of value is all about. So why do I want to do this? Why do I want you to do this? Because now, in your effort to be preemptive and preeminent, not only do you want to be able to express in words and mental pictures what the client wants, why the client wants it, and verbalize what they're trying to get closer to and away from, you want to actually help establish your client's buying criteria. You want to say, here are the things you want in the product or service you want to buy, whether it's a high priced or a low priced. And then you list them and you denominate and you describe and you define what your company does better than anyone else. You want a company that has all these processes. You want a company whose people, have MBAs and scientists. You want a company that has invested $10 million or more in their equipment. You want a company that has state-of-the-art logistics, etc. And I'm just giving you an example because that may be every competitive company, but you are establishing the criteria and you are establishing in their mind what they want, and you are conveying that we do all of these and more. So that's the next thing you want to do. When you fall in love with your clients, then you need to be able to paint a picture for them of how much better their life will be in the future. And that applies to whatever product service you sell. You can sell the most sophisticated technology. You can be a professional, be a dentist and talking about how much better their mouth is going to look and they're going to be willing to smile and how much better they're going to like themselves and feel comfortable in social environments. You can be an ice cream vendor just saying, please have an ice cream cone. You're going to feel so much better. It'll make you feel like when you were a kid again. It'll relieve your stress. Now you've learned how to understand the advantages, the disadvantages, how to focus on the advantages. When you see disadvantages that you have or advantages that people in your industry or people in related industries have, your goal is to figure out how you can take those same advantages and even do them better, or take the disadvantages you see and capitalize on them by offering either services or benefits they don't, that the competitors that have the disadvantages don't offer. Now, the next part of being preemptive and preeminent is value adding. And value adding has a number of powerful elements. So I'm going to give you a rapid insight because, again, I've only been given a very small amount when I do training programs, when I do intensive consultations. I get very deep in this. This is just an introduction. So realize this. Your client is a man or woman, a husband or wife, a father or mother, a son or a daughter. They're a human being and they have a lot of needs besides just whatever they buy from you. And they have a lot of needs to make the purchasing process of buying from you easier and better. So that opens up for you an enormous array of preemptive advantages. There are many things you can do. For example, you can take industry norms, industry customs like 30-day guarantee, and you can double it or triple it or quadruple it and immediately make your business 4 times more valuable. You can take business day 8 to 5 customer service and extend it by 1 hour or 2 hours and immediately distinguish yourself above everyone else. You can have a purchase arrangement where when they buy from you, they automatically get 1 or 2 additional items or services at no extra cost and make your commodity product all of a sudden a proprietary because it's got additions that none of your competitors would offer. You can take your buyer and give them other elements that no one else does. Let me give you some real advantage, some examples that will help you now. We had a dental supply company that was competing fiercely with other dental supply companies on price. We decided we didn't want to compete that way. So what we did was we went out and we paid experts. We got the top accounting firm in dental, in dentistry. We got the top dental management consulting firm. We got the top practice building firm, and we paid them retainers so that they would be available to our dental product clients free if they spent just $500 with us. Rather than trying to cut our price 5 pennies, we added millions of dollars of perceived value, and we gained advantage. When I did seminars in my young days, everyone else basically would have people buy the seminar and be stuck going to the seminar, and they didn't even offer any kind of guarantee. When people would sign up for my seminar, before they ever came, I would send them grounding material to study. I would send them a self-assessment that they could take to make sure that their business was well suited for the knowledge I was going to share. And I wouldn't even deposit their money until they had those items in their hand. Then when they came to the actual event, I wouldn't consider their purchase committed or binding on their part until they had experienced 40% of the full seminar. In other words, if it was a 3-day seminar, they could stay until 2 o'clock on the second day. And if it didn't deliver value, they could have their money refunded. We positioned it differently than anyone else. Plus, we gave them a library of resource material at the end that they knew they were going to get if they stayed to take home. And we were incomparable. And we sold $250 million, $250 million of seminars, because we preempted everyone else. So the key is, what other value can you give? Let me give you one more example. In the medical field, if any of you are doctors or specialists, specialists get their clientele, their patients, by 2 sources. One is direct patient referral, which in certain countries is very rare, and the other is direct referral from doctors. Well, there are a lot of specialists that are approaching general practitioners to refer to them. And there is a gap, a logic, a strategic void in thinking. One of the things that is critical when you want to be preemptive is understanding reason why. Reason why is ultimately the driving force and the basis behind all decisions. You make decisions or you don't make decisions for reasons. If you can understand and you can convey and you can express and you can present the reasons why somebody should do something or shouldn't, the reasons why your product is better, the reasons why your company cares more or serves more, the reasons why your product is made better, the reasons why your team is better educated, the reasons why your company serves them better after the purchase, the reasons why the product is engineered to perform longer or better, the reasons why they're making a better decisions with you, the reason why they should use this kind of a buying criteria, you gain total advantage. So with my example of medical specialists who needed the referrals of general practitioners, all their competitors were not giving reasons why, other than I'm a heart surgeon, or I'm a neurosurgeon, or an orthopedic surgeon. And when you have someone with a bad joint or a heart problem, why don't you refer to me? What we did was we used that as the starting point when we would contact general physicians to refer to us, but we would build. We would say, here's my education, here are my credentials, and they are arguably superior to everyone else. Here's all the cases I've done, here's the training I have, here's the knowledge I have, and we would dimensionalize. But then, because we knew that the general practitioners, the doctors we were trying to refer to us, had large practices. They were very stressed. They had trouble motivating their staff. They didn't make all the money that they wanted to make. They had stress. A lot of them had weight problems. A lot of them had high blood pressure. A lot of them didn't have balanced lives. We created collections of materials that we sent these doctors over periods of time. Books on how to manage stress, books on how to manage and get more performance out of their staff, access to experts that would teach them how to build more clients, how to get more patients for themselves, instruction on how to invest more wisely, courses on how to be healthier. We even had courses on how to have better marriages, and all that additional value added gave our specialists enormous advantage in the mind share and in the hearts of the general practitioners, the general physicians who referred these very lucrative cases to us. So I'm going to run out of time, so let's review. You want to be preemptive or you want to be a commodity? Duh, you want to be preemptive. Do you want to be preeminent or do you want to be average? You want to be preeminent. How do you become preemptive and preeminent? You first understand the weaknesses and the advantages of all your competitors, all the related competitors, all the alternative sources. Number two, you capitalize on the weaknesses and you improve on any advantage. Number three, you figure out exactly and precisely the words and the issues that resonate with your market. You use that with the books and also with the reviews. So you can speak to what they want and you can show them that you understand what they don't want. Number three, you denominate, you revere, you masterfully compare, contrast, and explain all the functions you do, all the processes you go through, all the effort, all the dimensions, all the training, all the investment, all the unique or not unique equipment so you stand out. Number 3 or 4, you make all your team a part of a vision to transform the lives of your clients. Number 5 or 6, you fall in love with the clients and their best interest, their betterment is the driving force behind all you do. Number 7 or 6 or 8, you add more value than anyone else and you denominate what they need to look like. You establish their value criteria. I can go a lot deeper and I wish I could, but again, they asked me to give you a short course primer, an introductory insight into understanding that most companies are commodities, they're mediocre, they're following the herd, they're cutting the ends off of their roast beef for no reason, that there are a lot of ways of looking at your relationship with your market, your positioning to the market, your distinction, your differentiation in how you revere your product, how you connect and appreciate your clients, how you grow and develop the passion and the purpose and the connection of your team. And when you understand how much more is possible, you should never, ever again allow yourself, your product, your company, your service, your people to be anything but preemptive and preeminent. And I envy you because the rest of the session, or the previous part of the session, you learned how to be excellent. You learned all about greatness. I wish I could go deeper, but hopefully this has value and it connects very well with what you have learned and will be learning to do differently so that you, your company, your people, your product and services will in fact personify in Japan or the world, wherever you market and sell, excellence and greatness at the most preemptive and preeminent level. Thank you.